Hello, and welcome to our webinar titled Human-Centered Change, the Key to Successful Technology Implementation. I'm Rachel Probert, and I will be your moderator for this session. A quick note, this webinar is being recorded for on-demand purposes. Before we begin, let's cover just a few housekeeping items. On your screen, you'll notice some boxes around the main presentation, and these are where you can engage and interact with us throughout the webinar. On the right-hand side, on the top right-hand side, you'll see a survey, and you can complete this survey at any time to provide feedback to our team on the webinar content and the presenter. We'd really appreciate your feedback if you could complete it. On the bottom right-hand side, you'll see a Q&A box, and this is where you can enter any questions that you might have, which we will work our way through at the end of the session where we have a designated Q&A time. Or when our presenter might ask you some questions, that is also where you can type some responses so that he can see them and interact with you during the presentation. Over on the left-hand side, you'll see a resources list. This includes a link to our web pages for Caterpillar Safety Services, which is the group that Justin and I work for. And you'll also see an image of a QR code. Now, this QR code will also be displayed at the very end of the webinar, and it's really your opportunity to just complete a really quick form and request a copy of this presentation. And in that form, you could also request to speak to someone on our team or even opt in to receive some thought leadership type content such as around safety culture and leadership. Now, it is my honor to introduce today's presenter, Justin Ganschow. Justin is a frequent speaker and writer on the impact of culture, leadership, and human biology on workplace safety. With nearly 20 years of experience in environmental education, public health, and private industry, he has led improvement initiatives as a consultant to a variety of industries. Currently, he serves as the Business Development Manager with Caterpillar Safety Services in Peoria, Illinois, and is a certified hazardous materials manager and a certified safety professional. Justin, handing it over to you.
Rachel, thank you so much, and thank you all for joining wherever you are in the world. Does anyone else struggle with new technology? Maybe it's just me. I've always considered myself pretty tech savvy, but the older I get, stuff seems less and less intuitive and more frustrating, and I end up asking my 8-year-old how to make my phone work. I don't know if any of you can relate. Well, welcome to Human-Centered Change, the key to successful technology implementation. And today we're going to explore what it takes to ensure that your next adoption of innovative solution or idea or a new technology is welcomed by your workforce. Before we get started, I'm going to invite you to check in with yourself and your environment to ensure that you're in a position to safely engage with today's conversation, both physically and psychologically. And a reminder that any images portraying people that are standing within 6 feet of one another were taken prior to the beginning of the pandemic. Technology has really transformed our world, from the invention of the wheel to steam power to the combustion engine and now electrification and beyond. From communicating via handwritten letters that were carried on horseback to transcontinental telegraphs and now smartphones. From navigating by the stars to handwritten maps to the pinpoint accuracy of GPS on our machines. And the Greek philosopher Heraclitus said, change is the only constant in life. And I don't think that could be any more true than in technology, which seems to be outdated by the time it hits our store shelves. Technology offers us a lot of things, right? Gains in efficiency of our business, improvements in the quality and the duration of our life, improvements in productivity and happiness. These are all promises that are made to us by new technologies. And it seems that the biggest gains tend to come from those most disruptive of technologies. Technologies like vaccines, thank goodness, right? Getting us back to normal. The automobile, the personal computer, now the Internet of Things. Everything around us seems to be connected to the Internet, and it has allowed us to connect with people all over the world, which I think is improving our lives. And these things, instead of small iterative changes over time, these technologies were huge leaps for our humanity. They were really disruptive technologies. And a disruptive technology is an innovation that significantly alters the way that consumers and industries or businesses operate. Disruptive technologies sweep away everything that came before it because it has attributes that are recognizably superior. But These technologies don't have to be as earth-shattering as the wheel to impact the way that you and your team work together. What are some disruptive technologies in your industry today? I really want to know. This is your first opportunity to use that Q&A function on the right-hand side of your screen, and you can put in there what's going on in your world that is disrupting the way that you work. And I'll watch for your responses. Don't be shy. Anybody? Are you seeing some, Rachel? Here we go. Brody says weather. Okay, maybe you can tell me some more. How is technology changing the way that you work? Ian says autonomy. Absolutely. Autonomy changes the way that we work. Thanks, Ian. Anybody else? I'll give you 3 more seconds. Okay, we'll move on. Absolutely. Autonomy, digitization, electrification, even functions like grade control and object detection on our machines, predictive analytics, remote work, all of these things disrupt the way that we've always done our business. So I want you to consider the last time you were confronted with a change in the way that you work. Maybe it was a simple change in email platforms, going from Lotus Notes to Outlook, for example, or switching from an Apple device to Android, or maybe it was going from in-person meetings with your customers, your clients, your employees to going all virtual in the year 2020. Big or small, when you make changes in the workforce, these technological advancements represent one thing and one thing alone in the eyes of your employees, and that is change. For better or worse, it's a change in the way that we work and what we know and what we've grown comfortable with, and it's difficult for most people to see things any other way. When implementing a new technology, many organizations focus on the functions and the features of that technology. And we train people how to make the gadgets and gizmos work. And obviously that's important to train them for operational competency. But to achieve the full potential promised by the technology, the organization also has to consider the processes impacted by the technology and the lattice work of people behind them. And while it may seem easy, we've helped many organizations that were frustrated uncover and overcome these barriers. So today we're going to take a strategic look at how to navigate change, integrating and optimizing your personnel with processes to get the most out of your investment in new technologies. Here's a recent example of why this is so important. 2 companies deployed the same technology to reduce operator fatigue events with the goal of improving employee safety and reducing equipment damage. It involved monitoring the operator's alertness and distraction with inward-facing cameras on the machines that captured and transmitted video clips back to the mine site. Site number 1 decided to install the technology, relying only on the merit of the features and functions without considering the human impact. There was no education for the users that the cameras were monitoring. Employees' perspectives were not considered before or after deployment of the new technology. And the responses to any fatigue or distraction events that were captured on the video were either inconsistent by management or any response at all was negative. It was punitive if somebody had a fatigue or distraction event within the machine. While the site did experience, as you can see on the slide, a reduction in fatigue events, 44%, there was also an exceptionally high number of tampering events with the equipment because the employees didn't understand or trust it. The second site took a different approach that you hear about a little later. If your employees are really going to buy into a new technology, they first have to trust it. And in order to build that trust, you have to get into their head to understand what the change feels like to them. Yeah, I said what it feels like to them. And you might think that we're talking about soft skills, but it is the biology and the psychology behind these emotions that will be key to your success in the technology implementation. Change represents either a psychological threat or a reward that activates either the threat center or the reward center of our brain. We share this evolutionary trait with all animals as a means to survive under dangerous situations. And regardless how far we've come in our evolution, our brains have maintained this critical function that served our ancestors really well as they were trying to survive on the savannah. And as a result, when something new comes along, our brain has retained that mechanism, and it works behind the scenes to determine whether we should stay and play and engage with this technology, or it presents a risk to us and we should run away. And obviously, a new technology doesn't present the same threat as a saber-toothed cat or a woolly mammoth out there on the savannah, but our brain still applies the same filter to determine whether what's in front of us is a friend or foe. If something that's going to hurt us psychologically or socially. And when it comes to pain, our brain experiences social and psychological pain the same way that it does physical pain. It can hurt. Australian-born psychologist Dr. David Rock classified 5 societal domains that we humans are affected by in his acronym SCARF. And SCARF stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relationship, and fairness. So anytime we are confronted with either a threat or a potential reward, we run it unconsciously through this SCARF filter. So to help your people, your team, minimize the fight or flight response to a change in the way that you work by adopting a new technology, Dr. David Rock suggests that you consider these 5 domains when going through change management. So we're going to explore each one of these in a little more detail to help you be better prepared. The first threat that we sometimes come across in confronting change is a threat to our status. So we're going to try this again. I want your feedback again. What are some potential threats to our status? It could be our financial status. It could be our status within the hierarchy of our organization, the status within our peer group, that a new technology coming into the workplace could present. What are some potential threats to our status? Go ahead and put that in the Q&A function once again. Jenny Krasny says, will I lose my job? Absolutely. That could be a real perceived threat. Maybe this disruptive technology is here to replace me. William Ordaz, having to do things differently. We don't like to learn to do things differently, right? We get comfortable, we get set in our ways. This way has always worked for me. Why should I change? That could be a real threat. Anyone else? Other threats to our status. We may look inadequate due to the unknown. Thanks, Ian. Yes, we could appear that we don't know what we're doing, and that could threaten our status within the group, within the hierarchy, opportunities for advancement. Will this show me up as not knowing something? Right, Jen? I show up like I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Even though I was really experienced before, this new way I'm going to be a novice at. Brian says, will I still be considered the expert? Again, something's new. We're starting all over. And Danon says the same thing, learning curves, right? These are all related, and they're real threats to our status because we've got to where we are because of how well we've performed in the past. And now this is something new. So there's some ways, some things you can do to protect these threats to your employees' status or to lower those risks that they are confronting. So you can preserve and enhance an employee's value, showing the benefits of using the new technology. And you're probably going to have to tailor your approach because you've got some people that are very experienced with the old way of doing it, and your messages to them will have to be different than from the novices, the ones that are just coming in, that are going to latch onto the new technology. Maybe they just learned about it in trade school, they've entered the trade, and now they're out there using it, and they're going to pick it up faster. Number 2, involve employees early to make them the experts and the champions of the change. Bring them in on the ground floor before you've started any implementation. Get those people that have lots of experience with the old way. Let them come in, let them try it out, let them see how it works for them before you do the full rollout, and let them be the champions in front of their peers. Tailor your messages to the individual needs and their unique perspectives. Something that will engage with people at all levels of experience with the new technology. Thanks for your participation. Next comes certainty. Our brains really love predictability. We like to be able to determine what's coming next. We want to know why, how, where, who. We need those things. And with the lack of certainty, it can put us into a tailspin. And you've probably seen this in your own experience. What happens when we don't clearly communicate about a change that's coming within our organization? Any ideas? Jenny, again, we think the worst. We run those worst case scenarios when there's no clarity. Anyone else experience that? We start rumors, sure, to fill in the blanks. Our brain fills in the blanks with all sorts of assumptions, like Bill says. We make assumptions, and they're real to us. Our brain fills in the blanks intuitively, and it all tends to be the negative. Danon says, lack of buy-in and interest, absolutely. If we don't know the what, how, where, and when, it all falls in a heap, absolutely, absolutely. If we don't clearly state why a change is being made, why a new technology is being introduced, what the next steps will be, when they will be conducted, who's responsible, employees will gravitate towards and focus on those unknowns. A weak or non-existent change communication strategy runs the risk of having employees entrenched in a belief that the tech won't work before it even arrives on site. So how do you combat this? Well, you start by communicating the why first. And a lot of organizations miss this when they go through change management. We don't talk about why. We just say, this is what it is. This is when it's going to be here. This is how you use it. But you should start with why. What is the rationale behind it? Why should they adopt it? Why is it good for them? What's in it for them, right? Communicate early and often with multiple channels when change or uncertainty is involved. We have to use spoken communication. We have to use visual, electronic communication, direct communication, and ensure that it was received and understood by everyone that this new change is going to impact. And in the midst of change, tell people what is remaining the same to give them some security. That's something we often overlook as well. Tell them what's staying the same. It'll give them some comfort. Next is autonomy. Autonomy puts the employee in control of their destiny. And we feel threatened when that is put in jeopardy. So I want you to think, how might a new technology cause people to feel a loss of control? We said earlier that a new technology might come in and replace me. It might replace my job. Those are some threats. Any ideas? How can technology make us feel like we're not in control? Technology performing better than human. Thanks, Jaime. The technology is performing better than us. The technology does the job for us, Ian says. Potential phase shift on the way we do things, the way we build work, like Uber. Yeah, takes it out of our hands. And we don't like to have control taken away from us. If you're anything like me, when I travel, I feel comfortable again once I get into that rental car and I'm in control. But the whole way there through the airport, I feel like I'm out of control, and that causes me anxiety. The same thing happens when we're implementing a new technology. So how can we combat that? Involve employees in creating the processes, the procedures, the communication, and the training to the rest of the organization. So you have some members of the group that are in control. They have their hands in it. They've got their fingerprints all over it, and they're now helping their fellow peers and their managers come through this change with things that are important to them. Allow flexibility in how, when, and where the technology is used. Maybe you pilot it first. Maybe you try it in a sandbox so you can work out all the kinks. And let employees know that they're allowed to try new things and to fail safely, as long as they're doing it without putting anyone in danger or letting productivity suffer. Next, we go to relationships, and technology can threaten relationships. It is associated with also our status amongst a group. So potentially, technology might impact relationships when some people adopt it and others don't. That could cause a rift in the group. If you've got people that pick it up really quickly, they're using it, they start getting all the recognition, while others who are slower to adopt, we'll talk about them in a few minutes, that could cause a rift within the work group, which is bad for your culture. So what you can do is acknowledge openly that change is difficult. Talk about it and acknowledge that some people are going to adopt this. They're going to pick it up faster than others. Put more emphasis on recognizing people for creating solutions rather than disciplining people for their mistakes. This is something that our leaders have to be very proactive and very intentional about, because it's not natural. Teach your people how to address each other from a position of support instead of enforcing policies to preserve psychological safety within the work group. And finally, we come to fairness. We have an innate sense of right and wrong. We expect to have the same opportunities as everybody else and the potential outcomes, the potential rewards as everyone else around us. And if we believe that we're being unjustly punished or somebody else is being disproportionately rewarded, those cultural implications will also impact our thought processes on the job. And while the naysayers and the resistors of the change may take up more of your time, don't forget those who are already on board and keen to embrace the technology. So how could a change in technology be unfair? Maybe we only focus as a leader on the people that pick it up right away and they're being more efficient and more productive and they get all the praise. We still have to spend time with the people that need help to adopt it. So set clear expectations on how that tech should be used and consistently notice and recognize when it's done by everybody. Allow everyone to test and try and learn the new technology before you start enforcing its use. It's kind of that pilot approach. And then share why decisions have been made even when it's difficult. Navigating the technology landscape, let alone managing the people side of change, can be overwhelming. And we have a tool here that we'll share that help you reduce these threat responses. And it was developed by a company down in Australia called Minds at Work. It's called the 4 Doors of Change. And it can help you dilute these threat responses and also allow your people to fully grasp the scale of the change and all that they stand to gain. So you can use it as a conversation tool. Done well, it helps audiences articulate their concerns while right-sizing their perceptions about what's going on. So you should use your more experienced workers along with some of your novice workers and everybody in those tangential departments that are going to be impacted by the change. So the 4 Doors of Change has, you guessed it, 4 doors. The first 2 doors represent everything within the organization that is going to stay the same after the change has occurred, after you've adopted the new technology. The 3rd and 4th doors are, you guessed it, representing everything that is changing after the new technology has been implemented. And we're going to name the doors. The first one is called Still Can, and it's always been open to us. It represents everything that we could do before we implemented the new technology, and we can still do those things after the change, and it's a really long list. Door number 2 is called Still Can't, and it remains locked to us by the change, by the new technology. It represents things that we couldn't do before, and we still can't do after we make the change, and it's also a pretty long list. Door number 3 is called Now Can. It represents everything that we can do now that we couldn't do before. These are typically the opportunities for improvement that we seek by adopting the technology in the first place, and it should be a really long list. And the final door is called Now Can't. And this is the one that causes the heartburn, it causes the anxiety in your employees. It symbolizes the things that we could do before the change, and now we can't. These are the things that we gravitate to, but this list is typically much shorter in length than the things that are not changing, and the list of everything that we can do now that we couldn't do before that is positive. So what I recommend you do is you get a cross-functional team together. People from all the departments that are impacted by the change directly and indirectly. Get them into a room, explain what is this new technology, why are we adopting it, tell them all the ins and outs, and then have them work through these 4 doors of change. So either as individuals or in small groups, brainstorm and document these things. Number 1 is, what are the things we could do and we still can do? Number 2, what are the things we couldn't do and we still can't do? What are the things we couldn't do before, but now we can because we have this new technology? And what are the things that we could do before and now we can't? So give them some time, let them document it. We really like to use sticky notes, and I'll tell you why here in a second. But let them put all those ideas, cover the whole table with all these ideas that are populating the 4 doors of change. Any change that's worth pursuing should offer a lot to gain, a little to lose, and leave the majority unchanged. So if your team, your cross-functional team, digs deep in the exercise, the results should trend in that direction. So now what do? You've got a pile of sticky notes on your table. Well, most of us do not think in statistics. I certainly don't. But visuals help, so make the data visible. If you use those sticky notes, a simple affinity diagram like what's showing in the upper right-hand corner of the slide will show your team where the weight of the change resides by the number of notes at each door. So put up there door 1 through 4 and just have them populate those things that are not changing, the things that are changing, what we can do now, what we can't do. And the number of notes should fall in a similar pattern to what's showing right there. Number 2, reinforce all that's remaining unchanged. That helps reduce that certainty threat that we talked about a few minutes ago with a simple ratio of all that's not being impacted by the change. Highlight all that they stand to gain, everything that they can do now that they couldn't do before, and elevate the potential improvements in their status and autonomy domains that the change will bring to them personally. Number 4 is acknowledge and address what they stand to lose. We need to empathize with them because these things are real. And even though these things may be fewer in number, the perceived relative impact might loom larger in the mind of those employees. So show your empathy as a leader or a change agent. Number 5 is to create a communication plan to get these results out to the rest of the organization. Let the employees share what they learned through the exercise, and if we've done this correctly, they should leave excited. Make this whole thing positive, because change is rarely perceived positively. But now you have data to show them why it's good for them, and it came from this cross-functional team. So celebrate those who participated with sincere recognition and appreciation. More on that in a few minutes. Here's your first homework. I want you to think if you have these tools in place when you're helping your organization navigate change. Is technology going to be perceived as a friend or as a foe? How are we going to gain the employees' perspectives prior to implementing the change? What do our leaders need to address their employees' concerns? And how will we keep track of these perspectives over the course of the change? Take that home and discuss it with your team. Now that you're empowered with your employees' perceptions, the next step is to consider how the technology change will be adopted across the organization. And people adopt technology at different rates. And you do the same thing. And I have a poll. I want to know, when a new smartphone or a new tech device comes out, what do? Do you wait in line so that you're the first one that has this new shiny object? Do you camp out outside the store? Do you wait a few weeks and read the reviews of the people that have tried it first? Do you wait 6 months until the prices come down? Do you wait until next year, until the newer model comes out and you buy the last year's model? Or do you still use a flip phone from the 1990s? I want to know. So click the little button next to which one most accurately represents you. I'll give you a few seconds and then we'll see how the responses are distributed. Feel like we need some Jeopardy music. Okay, we've got 13% have completed it. I know we can do better than that. 19%. It's climbing. Who are you? Give you 10 more seconds. We're up to 28% participation. Okay, I'm going to click the button. Oh, still rolling in. All right, we're at 38%. I'm clicking it. Last chance. Okay, so wait in line. We've got 8.3%. 41%, the highest percentage, said they're going to wait a few weeks. 16% are going to wait 6 months. 33%, second largest group, is going to wait more than a year, and 0% are going to keep their flip phone. Okay, very interesting. Let's see how that compares with the rest of the population. Everett Rogers was a professor of rural sociology, and he popularized his theory called the diffusion of innovations way back in 1962 in his book of the same name. And that was a long time ago, but his principles still apply today. And the basis of it is that innovation is adopted by the process in which it is communicated amongst participants of a social system, how it spreads throughout an organization. It relies heavily on people adopting that innovation and then sharing their perceptions of it with everybody else. Achieving it within your organization requires you to understand how people decide whether or not to adopt this new technology and then share it with everybody else. So that critical mass, that where that star is at the top of the curve, that's what we're trying to reach. And once we get there, it gets everybody else over the hump. But you can see that that overall population is broken up into 5 segments. So we need to know who those people are. In Rogers' model, people fit into these 5 categories. We have innovators at 2.5%. And I think we had 8.3% of the population on this call that responded to the survey that said that they're going to wait in line. So that's higher than average. You guys are higher than average on the call today. Then we have the early adopters, 13.5%, followed by the early majority, followed by the late majority, and then the laggards, 16%. We didn't have any on the call because if we had technology laggards, they probably wouldn't be on a webinar with us today anyway. The diffusion of adoption of a new technology depends on the types of adopters and the innovation decision process within your organization. So it's helpful to have a basic understanding of how these people operate. The adoption of each type is broadly dependent on the innovator's ability to understand and use the new technology first and foremost. I need to know what it is, how it's going to impact my life. What's my motivation to adopt the change? Is it because my boss says I have to, or I can see that this is really going to be a good thing for me and I want to adopt it because maybe it's going to elevate my status? Number 3, what is the connection to the broader community? How connected am I to the other people around me that are using the new technology? And finally, do I have the agency to create change? How well connected am I? How well do I influence the people around me? There's also organizational influences such as the tension for change. So how motivated is my company to adopt this new change? Because there are financial benefits, there are safety benefits to how well we adopt this and how quickly. Number 2 is then innovation system fit. So what's the compatibility with the existing systems and processes and procedures that we live in that this new technology is going to be applied to? And finally, the assessment of implications is how clearly can I as an individual user see the benefits of adopting this new technology? If it's far away from me, if it's several levels removed, I am slower to adopt the technology. Let's get to know each of these adopters a little bit better. First, the innovators are risk takers, and they are the very first to adopt the innovation. They're the ones that are camped out outside of the Apple store to get the latest iPhone. They tend to have high social status. They're well connected with other innovators, but they're only 2.5% of our population. Then we move on to the early adopters. They're influential. Their opinions matter most to the rest of the entire group. The highest opinion leadership resides in this group. They're more careful and discreet in their adoption choices than the innovators. They're not going to be out on social media touting that they've got the latest phone. They're going to wait a little bit before they jump on the bandwagon. The early majority is going to adopt an innovation after a significantly longer time has passed than the innovators and the early adopters. They have above average social status, and they're connected with those early adopters, but they're seldom the opinion leaders that are going to influence others. Now we move down to the later side of the curve. The late majority adopts an innovation only after the majority has already done so. They are skeptics. They have below average social status. They are connected with other people in the late majority and in the early majority, and they have very little opinion leadership. Finally, we get to the laggards, and they have no opinion leadership. Nobody cares what they have to say. They have an aversion to change agents, and they focus more on traditions, the way things have always been done. I've always done it this way. Why should I change? You probably know some of these people. They're probably coming to mind. They're usually only in close contact with their family and close friends. Traditional change management focuses on managing a lot of resistance from the right-hand side of the curve. However, shifting our focus to the left side helps us leverage social pressure by those people that are faster at adopting it. So if we can get them involved and have them help us by getting the word out, it's going to help us reach that saturation point faster. And we've learned at Caterpillar that having a systematic approach is the best method to help you achieve this. Way back in 2017, in the last decade, Caterpillar did a lot of research on change management and introduced a new 4-step model with a foundation of the 2 more important motivators for human-centered change, which are logic and emotion. So this is how we are managing change at Caterpillar today. We clearly define the change. We design a plan that considers the impact to people in the business. We deliver the plan, and then we drive performance. So here's a framework to get you started. The first step is to clearly define the full scope of the change. If you involved your employees in the 4 doors exercise we talked about a few minutes ago, you have a head start on what is changing and what is not. Another reason to use it. The define phase should be completed by those most knowledgeable about the change, the technology that's going to be implemented. So here's some helpful questions to answer. What's changing first and foremost? Why are we changing? Get deep into the why. Who owns the change? Who can people go to ask questions? Those people should be out front and visible. When are we changing? Who's going to be impacted? Not just the direct users of the technology, but all of those people that are indirectly connected, that are running processes and systems behind where the work happens. What's the impact to our strategy, to the processes, to our organizational structure, to the things we measure, all those metrics that track our performance every day? How does it impact our behaviors? What about our skill sets? Do we need people with different skill sets than the ones we had before because the technology has changed the work? We need to define what success looks like so we know if we're winning, because that drives morale. We also need to think about what could cause us to fail. And if we can understand what could cause us to fail and we address those things proactively, it's going to increase our opportunity for success. But before we just rush out and start creating the change plan, it's critical to determine which change approach your organization is going to use. The approach is usually dictated by the urgency of the change. So there's 3 styles to choose from. You've got the directive style, where a leader makes all the decisions and tells everybody else what to do. You've got the facilitative style, where a leader steers the team but seeks input from other members of the organization. And then you have the collaborative style, where contributors from across the organization have an equal say, an equal voice in creating the solution. And as the chart shows, you gain a lot more commitment from your people when you allow them to make decisions on how the technology will be utilized through the collaborative approach. It takes more resources, it takes more time to do it this way, but in our experience, this is the key to successful adoption and sustainability. At a bare minimum, you should be seeking input from a broader team to ensure that you aren't missing any blind spots and address their concerns in the next step of the process, which is design. The second step is designing the plan, addressing the impacts to people and remembering all of those scarf implications, the scarf threats to our status, to our certainty, to our autonomy, to our relationships and fairness, and how these things impact our business. So we need to know, where is that resistance going to come from? What are the objections? Because you're going to have objections, especially from people that are on the right side of that diffusion of innovation curve. Have we gone through changes in the past? Probably. What did we learn from those things? Did we document any of them? Can we think back to what went well so we can replicate those things? Or what didn't go so well so we can put mitigating things in place so that we don't make the same mistakes twice? What do our people need to know? And how are we going to get it to them? How do we train them? How do we upskill them to use this new technology, which may be different from what they're used to doing? How are we going to measure our progress? What are we going to recognize when our employees do correctly so we can have them repeat those desired behaviors? And then how do we collect their feedback? How do we make adjustments midway through the implementation? How do we communicate those changes back to the employees that need to hear them? We can't just communicate at the beginning. It's a continuous process. Determining how to influence behaviors and improve motivation for each type of our adopters through communication, learning, and reinforcement should be a key consideration as you develop your plan. Involving your early adopters with high opinion leadership is going to help pull people along so that you can reach that tipping point faster. We'll start with communication. Our people need to know why more than anything else. Why can't they continue doing what they were doing before? More importantly, what do they stand to gain by making the change and adopting the new technology? Peers are going to be better at convincing their fellow end users than management, so collaborate with them in the messaging. Then they need to know what they need to do differently, how to do it, and when to do it. Learning is next. It's not enough to just tell people about the change. You also have to equip them with the skills and resources to do it. What functional learning must be completed to ensure competence? And finally, you have to reinforce it. You can't just tell people something one time and expect they're going to do it. In our research, we found that only about 30% of the population is going to do that. You tell them one time, you show it to them, you explain it to them, you train them, they're going to go do it. We call them drivers. 60% are going to do it with consistent reminding. They are the doers, and 10% aren't going to do it at all. Those are the laggards, right? They're draggers. They drag everybody down. Leaders and change agents must continuously acknowledge and reinforce the desired behaviors to motivate those late adopters to take up the new technology. More on this in just a couple minutes. Now it's time to execute the plan in the deliver phase, ensuring that all impacted people have been communicated with, have been trained, and the plans for reinforcement have been enacted by our leaders. Include those influential opinion leaders and the early adopters to help build engagement from the rest of the organization in the rollout. Even the most carefully designed plans rarely go off without a hitch, so establish feedback loops for the end user to submit their experiences and feedback back to the team. Remember that not everyone is going to embrace change the same. So consider the logic and the emotions of people across the spectrum, especially those that were on the right side of our curve. A Swiss psychologist named Elizabeth Kubler-Ross dedicated her life to helping people navigate the process of grief. And guess what has been found since that time? We experience grief the same way we experience change. It's the same emotions. So her change curve, her grief curve was adopted to be a change curve, and it reflects these 7 stages of emotions that a person goes through when they're confronted by a change. This is especially true for those late majority and laggards in our previous curve, those that are most resistant to the change. So as individuals progress through these natural stages, your role as a leader or a change agent also has to progress. So if we start all the way over on the left in the shock and numbness phase, resistance to the change starts to build. That's that yellow line going up. Here, we seek to provide as much information about the change as possible. We have to inform them constantly. Focus on what's staying the same, again, appealing to their need for certainty. Tell them what's staying the same. Remind them of what they stand to gain while acknowledging their sense of loss. They're going to go through a mobilization where they're paralyzed by the change. They're going to deny that they have to make the change. When we move on to the suffering phase, we start to reach that peak and anger sets in. Your role changes to providing them support. So ask them why they're feeling angry. Support them through that change. Then they're going to start bargaining. Why can't we do it the old way? The old way was so much better. It was so much easier. And once they realize that it's not going away, they start to slip into a depression where they realize they're going to have to change. This isn't going away. And this is where we have to grant them the most empathy in the room to grieve. And again, it's draining as a boss. It's emotional for you too. But we have to work with our individuals to help them get through this if we want the technology to be adopted by everybody. In the last phase, we move to resolution. And here we inspire them as they explore what this new way means, as they start to explore using the technology. Those that have completed the cycle can be key allies to other people within their peer group. So if you've got a laggard, you've taken through the whole process, they come out the other side, they're using it, they're getting progress, they're getting results, you can enlist them to inform, support, and inspire their peers. And it makes your job a lot easier. So once your plan has been delivered, it's essential to drive performance through the organization, connecting people with processes and the technology. Otherwise, acceptance of the new innovation may fade before it's fully embedded. So to be successful, there needs to be top to bottom ownership of the results of the change. In order for that change to be realized, use of the new innovation must be embedded in all those existing processes. This takes time. It gets complicated, but it's what you have to do if you want it to be successful. If you want to realize all of those full promises, the full ROI of the technology, you have to get it embedded. And the leader, the change agents need to monitor and respond to the feedback loops that were established in the plan that we've rolled out. If gaps are identified after delivery, update the plan with further communication and training efforts as necessary. And there's a systematic method, once again, to make this all possible. And it's really our specialty. It's called the 6 criteria of operational excellence. We borrowed this from Dr. Dan Peterson, who is an industrial psychologist who worked with companies for over 40 years to help them improve their safety culture. And what he found was it didn't matter what industry they were in, what the nature of the work was, the size of the organization, all that mattered was the nature of leadership at all levels of the organization to make improvements. And we've applied this same methodology that we've been helping companies with in safety for decades here at Safety Services now to helping companies manage change. It starts with our top leaders. Our top leaders have to be visibly committed to the change. They have to be out front. They have to be speaking about it. They have to be living it out. Sometimes they need to be demonstrating how the technology works and why they're committed to it, just like everybody else that is the end user. They have to understand it. If it's to be believable by anybody else in the organization, it has to start with top leaders. Next is our middle managers. They have to be actively involved. And our middle managers are measuring and responding to a lot of aspects of the business. But change has to be one of those critical elements that they're out front leading themselves. They have to be actively involved with how their supervisors are driving the use of the technology with the frontline employees. They have to be asking really good, thoughtful, intelligent, open-ended questions of their supervisors about how the change is going. How do they know it's going well? Why isn't it going well? To really dig into the root cause of what's going well, what's not going well, so we can make sure that we reach our desired objectives. Number 3 is that our frontline leaders have to be performance focused. They have to be paying really close attention to how the work is getting done with the new technology, because we've done all this work to design, develop, deploy, and drive this plan. We have to make sure that it's working, and it's on the shoulders of our supervisors to make sure that that is happening. And our supervisors have a lot going on. There's a lot that they're accountable for, but this is one of those things. If it's a critical element of your business to make this new technology work, to make it successful, to gain all and realize all those promises of the technology, the supervisors have to be driving it. And next we come to our frontline employees. They're typically the end users of this technology. And you'll be a lot more successful in the adoption of it if they are participating in how the system and the processes and the policies and procedures around the technology are created. If their hands are on it, they're much more likely to adopt it and to drive using the technology with themselves and with their peers. If the system is flexible to accommodate the site culture, if we take our time, we do it right, we pilot it, we learn from our mistakes and our feedback, we make changes, it's going to be more positively perceived. So apply these 6 criteria of operational excellence to how your organization adopts the change. You've probably heard what gets measured gets done, and we apply accountability across Dr. Peterson's criteria to make a change visible and measurable so that it is manageable within a business. Our model for ensuring that intentions are turned into actions involves 4 steps. Number 1, we clearly define expectations around using, monitoring, or responding to use of the new technology at each level of the organization. What these roles are, what they look like, will vary at each level of the organization, but they all have to be connected. Next, we equip our people to meet those expectations. This comes in the form of training them what's expected and also in providing them with the resources that they need to be successful. It might be tools and equipment, but the most common resource required is time. Time to learn how to use it, to try it out, to learn from our mistakes, and then to put it into practice. And we found that a lot of organizations do a pretty good job of defining expectations and equipping their people. But where it breaks down is in these next 2 steps. What gets measured gets done. So when it comes to measurement of the adoption of the new technology, it's not enough to just measure if it was used or not, which is quantitative. We also have to measure how well it was done and how it helped us to achieve our results. That's the qualitative measurement. The quantitative measurements are easily pencil whipped, but the qualitative measurements reveal much more about the value and impact of the new technology. So when we hold our supervisors and our managers accountable for the measurement of the quality of their team's activities through their observation and involvement, performance is truly being measured. And the final step is to respond to the performance of the defined activities with recognition when we've done it right, or coaching to improve that performance. This lets that individual user know that you are paying attention as their boss. It lets them know that it matters to you, and it feels really good to be recognized. When we reinforce the positive performance, those desired behaviors get repeated. Our brain deeply desires this last step of accountability from you, the leader or the change agent, because what gets measured gets done, but what gets recognized gets repeated. Receiving recognition activates the pleasure center of our brain, the reward center. It releases dopamine, which is a feel-good hormone, and it reinforces those behaviors that we just performed that our leader caught us doing. That means we're more likely to do it again. And here's how to make that work in your favor. There's 5 steps to effective recognition. The first one is it's timely. It's more impactful when it's given in the moment because it triggers that release of hormones right after I did the thing that you caught me doing right. Number 2 is that it's relevant. It should be specific to what you saw them doing with the use of the new technology. Number 3, it's sincere, because people can tell if you really care. So share why it was so important that they were doing it the way that you had trained them to do, you're measuring them on, it'll send a powerful message. Number 4, it's confirmed. It should come naturally in the form of a conversation. So allow that person to respond to that recognition that you've given them, and it should be frequent. And research shows that we should be giving 7 instances of positive recognition for every one coaching or corrective conversation with our employees. That might sound ridiculous, but there are a lot more opportunities to acknowledge what people have done right than coming down on them when they've done something wrong. But it's something we have to do proactively and intentionally as a leader. So try it out. You don't have to do 7 tomorrow. Maybe start with 3 and work your way up. But I think you'll be amazed at how far sincere words of recognition will get you as a leader. Here's the second part of your homework. Some tools for change. Have you planned for your deployment if you're about to embark on a change journey? How do you know that you're ready? what departments are going to be impacted, who's representing each of them in the change plan. Have we thought about the full scale and all the tentacles that this change is going to have, and have we represented those people? And what is our organizational strategy for sustaining the use of the technology? Well, you remember those two companies we talked about much earlier? The second site realized that they needed to take a much more holistic approach to adopting the technology, focusing on their people. So by educating and involving the employees and creating processes around the use of this technology that was monitoring their behavior, management responded first with compassion when there was a fatigue or distraction event, and then as a coaching opportunity instead of discipline. They experienced fatigue events reduction nearly double the rate of the other site, 82% versus 44%. They only had 13 tampering events versus 375 at the site that just focused on training people on how to use the technology. Or they didn't tell them anything at all. They just put it in the cabs. So while you may be achieving some positive results with the merits of a technology alone, you could be missing out on a significant opportunity to do far greater by taking that human-first approach. Much more to gain. So are you ready for change? Maybe this is the first time you've thought about technology adoption with a human-focused perspective. Beyond training the end users on the features and functions, are you prepared to engage them in a new way to address their natural reactions to change, all those threats? Define, develop, deploy, and drive a plan with expectations at all levels of the organization based on catching people doing things right? Do you have everything that you need in your toolbox for change? Well, our team here at CAT Solutions and Services are experts in safety culture transformation, leadership development, and change management, and we're here to help you on your journey. Well, I want to thank you, first and foremost, for spending an hour of your very valuable time with us. Rachel mentioned previously that you can get a copy of these slides by scanning the QR code that's on your screen right now, or the one that's off to the left. You can get in touch with me directly. My contact information is listed there, and I think now we've got a little bit of time for some questions.
Yes,
Over to
Justin,
you, Rachel.
Thank you so much. What wonderful, tangible tips for people to take away today. Thank you. We have had some questions come through, so if you do have questions, please go ahead and submit them in the Q&A box. We'll take a few minutes to get through as many as we can, and if we don't get to your questions, you can always email Justin directly with his email address on the slide there. Okay, Justin, here we go. One of the questions that came through: what do you suggest to leaders and enterprises who might be innovators, but the workforce are late majority or laggards?
That is an excellent question. We've got leaders that are innovators, the ones that are out front, the ones that are selecting what technology to adopt. They're the ones that are buying it and installing it. It's really important that we have innovators within our organizations. We need those types of people because it drives us forward. It challenges us. It challenges our business. But we also have to bring those people that are on the other part of the spectrum of the diffusion of innovation curve. We have to bring them in early. We have to get them thinking about what changes are about to come. You can put them through that 4 doors exercise early. So get a subject matter expert. Maybe it's somebody from the vendor that knows all the ins and outs of the technology, and have that cross-functional team, people that are going to be late adopters, and you can start to figure out who they are by what they say and what they do. Get them in a room together and have them talk through all of these things. And I think it's really important for our leaders, our innovators, to understand that the way that they see the world is different from the way everyone else sees the world, and that we can't force this upon people. We have to be very deliberate, very intentional about the way we engage our workforce if you want it to be successful. Because we can try to force it from above, and you might make some progress, but what we've seen is that the ROI is much delayed when you try to force it through versus taking this human-first approach.
Excellent, thank you.
That answered your question.
All right, another question. What change methodology has worked for you?
I think the most impactful change process that I have been a part of is using this cross-functional team methodology. So this is what we want to achieve. It's come down from above. We want to do this thing, but we're not going to force it by management. So we get a cross-functional team together. We have them follow a recipe, follow a process so that we know what is our objective, what's everybody's roles and responsibilities. If I went back to those four elements of accountability, who's accountable for what? How do we train them on what it is? How do we measure that they do it with quality? How do we recognize when they do it right? And then allowing that cross-functional team to go out and pilot it in a systematic, controlled way, get feedback from those end users, retool their process, and then do the full rollout. So now you've already got a portion of your population that has tried it, and management just supported it from afar. We've empowered them. We've given them the tools. We've given them a process. We allow them to go develop, play with it in the sandbox, and then roll it out. And then management gets what they wanted. They get the results, and now they have engaged employees that created that solution. And we have a whole process around that, but it's really about getting that team together, building that camaraderie and that common vision, common purpose, common goal, and we're all in this together, and this is how we're going to get there. And then let them bring everybody else along. That helps you achieve that diffusion of innovation much faster.
Perfect. I know we are just a minute over. I am going to go ahead and ask another question here that came through. What do you do if you go through the 4 doors of change exercise that you described in the presentation today, and you haven't identified enough benefits to really convince those naysayers that the change is good for them? What are your thoughts on that?
That is a great question. So we went through this whole exercise, and we've got 3 things that we can do now with the change, and we've got all these things we're going to lose. So you've got 2 things to consider. Is this change the right change? That's one thing to consider. The other thing is maybe we didn't dig deep enough, or maybe we didn't have enough information about the what, the why, and the how. So bring in subject matter experts, and maybe you got to run the exercise again. So we need to understand fully what is possible if we go through the change. What does this new technology represent to us? And then go through the change exercise again. And if you get the same results, then maybe that change, that technology isn't right for you, or it's not right for you now. Perfect.
Thank you. All right. I'm going to sneak one last one in, and then I think we'll wrap it up, okay?
Okay.
All right. Does a more aggressive change approach detract from a human-oriented process? You kind of touched on this a little bit, but if you could elaborate a little bit more, I think that'd be helpful.
Yeah, more aggressive?
Yep. Does a more aggressive change approach detract from a human-oriented process? So I'm assuming if things need to go quickly.
Okay. I was thinking like aggressive, like mean.
I'm assuming aggressive timing.
Sure. Because a lot of times we want things now, especially if we've invested a lot of money in whatever this technology is. We want it now. We want to start to see that return. And what I always caution leaders on is, yes, we want to get that return. We want to get it as soon as possible. We want to get this right. Because if we don't do it right, if we make missteps, now we start to erode the trust. Remember, we said that trust has to be established first if you want this to happen. If people don't trust the technology and they don't get recognition and reinforcement from management, then we start to put it aside. We start to turn it off and go back to the old way. And now it's going to take you even longer to reach that ROI and the results that you want. So restrained aggression, restrained timelines would be key. Let's get it right. But that just means we should plan ahead. So as soon as you think that you're going to adopt this disruptive technology, you should start planning. You should start designing that plan.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. And I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up since we're a few minutes over the top of the hour. I just want to say thank you, Justin, for the presentation and fantastic material for our audience. And attendees, thank you so much for engaging with us and answering the questions and having a great dialogue today. So thank you so much. I hope everyone has a great and safe day. Take care.